Oh, hi. You've caught me in the middle of a little spell work. Give me just a second. I'll be right with you. Abracadabra, alakazam, Beeblebrox is a ham. First, second, neutral park. Hie thee hence, you leafy narc. Guess it didn't work. Maybe it did. I need to go check on something. I'll be right back. Hi there, I'm Skaggy, a practicing witch and a professional tarot nerd, and I'm glad you're here. Earlier this week, I was standing in my kitchen and took note of some dried leaves hanging there above my sink. It's almost New Year and about time for the greens, peas, and ham. Each year, on New Year's Day, I cook a big pot of collard greens as part of a traditional New Year's meal. I also take some of the fresh collard leaves and hang them above the sink. You see, those collards are to bring money into the house during the upcoming year. Well, as I stared at those formerly green collards, I said, y'all didn't work this year, did you? And then I had this weird thought. What if they did work this year? Would things have been a whole lot harder this year if I hadn't hung those greens on New Year's Day? I don't know that I'd call my hanging of those greens a spell. I don't usually put a huge amount of energy into it. But maybe I'll do more with it this New Year. But it does bring up an interesting idea. What if the spells we think didn't work actually did? How can we know? Every serious practitioner I know will admit that they've had spells fizzle or work in unintended ways. That spell I was working on earlier didn't really do anything other than trip some electrical breakers. See? Unintended consequences. A friend of mine was in serious need of a job, and finally, after a long search, had gotten herself an interview. She came to me asking if I'd be willing to do anything to help. Well, of course I'd help. She was really nervous about that interview, so I did do something to help her out. She's smart, reliable, and competent, and I knew she could do the job, so the work I performed was to help her shine during the interview. After her interview, she came back to me. She hadn't gotten that job. However, the interviewer was so impressed with her that she was offered a different and higher paying job. Now, I'm not saying that my spell got her a job. She did that for herself. But I do think the spell did help her during the interview so that the interviewer could really see her for the awesome lady she is. But that spell didn't really work quite the way I had intended. It kind of worked sideways. When my son was much smaller, we were involved in the Cub Scouts together. We had a great time. One of the highlights of each scouting year was the Pinewood Derby. That's where the boys make small cards out of blocks of wood and race them. This is something Cub Scouts have been doing since 1953. And I still have a couple of my cars from my own Cub Scout days. Well, naturally, the goal of each scout is to win. My son's cars had done okay for a couple of years, but one year he asked me if Magick could help. Of course it could. So after the car was finished, we did a spell to help it out. When putting together the spell, I asked him what one word would he pick for that spell. And he chose victory. So together, we focused our intention on the work and chanted our spell into a sigil we'd drawn on the bottom of the car. And that year, his car didn't even place. But he did win an award for the most creative car. Naturally, he was disappointed that he didn't win the Derby. I asked him if he thought the Magick had failed us. And he said he thought it had. Maybe not, I said. Maybe we failed the Magick. After all, your car did achieve a victory. It was the most creative. So, was our spell a failure? Have you ever heard, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it? There's a great example of this from pop culture in the movie Practical Magic, adapted from a book by Alice Hoffman. If you're a witchy type person and have never seen this movie, you really should correct that oversight. In the film, a pair of witchy sisters each do some magic that doesn't quite work the way that they wanted, and they spend most of the movie dealing with the consequences. So what makes a spell fizzle or not work as expected? To answer that question, maybe we need to answer a different question first. What makes a spell work? It's magic, right? Magic makes spells work. Surely that's the answer. Well, kinda. A little. Well, it's part of it, at any rate. Without delving too much into what magic is, let's save that for another time. Let's talk about the nuts and bolts of spellcraft a bit. In The Inner Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penczak, he discusses very succinctly what it takes to make magic work. Intention, will, and a way to move energy. Intention is a word that comes up a lot when talking about magic and spells. And to be honest, I think intention is really rather overrated. Let me explain. You remember that old chestnut about gift giving? It's the thought that counts. Well, that's how many folks look at intention when it comes to their spell. Like intention is all that matters. Intention isn't the end of the work, it's the beginning. Intention is where we define for ourselves the goal of our spell. Think of it like this. I want to take a trip someplace. Ireland, for example. I fully intend to get there. That's my goal. But how do I make that happen? I have to figure out how, right? I need to get the money together, plan my travel, where I'm going to stay, how long I'm going to stay, what I'm going to do once I get there, and I guess I'd need to get a passport too. My intentions are useless if I don't do anything else. Will is another word that comes up quite a bit when discussing magic and spells. It comes to us from Old English and its Germanic ancestors and means to desire. But will is more than just wanting something. For example, I want to do these video thingies. However, it's my will that makes me get off my tail and actually do them. We talk about willpower, but it's usually in the context of not doing something. I wanted to eat all the banana pudding, but I used my willpower to only eat one bowl. It doesn't end there, though. Ever had a particularly gnarly chore to get done, but you would really rather have been eating banana pudding? Yet you did the chore anyway because it needed doing. Well, that was your will that you used to get the work done. In the Ireland trip example, it would be my will that came into play when I put my intention to work. It would be my will that would keep me going when the inevitable snags arose. And lastly, to make a spell happen, we have to have a way to move the necessary energy. Moving magic around is what spells are all about. And that's where the tools, ingredients, the rituals, and all the other stuff we generally think of when thinking about what magic looks like comes into play. All the stuff of magic, and all the practice, and all the meditation makes up our means of moving energy. Let's get example-y and metaphorical for a minute. I like archery. I learned to shoot a bow when I was a kid, and I've enjoyed it ever since. I'm by no stretch of the imagination what I'd call an archer. I just know how to shoot a bow. So let's say that there's a target over there, and I'd like to stick an arrow in it. So I knock that arrow onto the string in my bow. I draw it back. I aim and release. Whoosh! Off flies the arrow, and thunk hits the target. And this is just like our spells. Our intention is to hit the target. Our will is drawing back on the string. And the bow? Well, the bow is our means of moving the energy held when we drew back on the string. All of those parts work together. Without our intention, we wouldn't know where to aim. Without our will, there would be no energy to aim with. And without the bow, we'd have no way to direct that energy. Yeah, I suppose I could just chunk the arrow at the target, but that would be less effective, I'm sure. I'm sure because I've actually tried that before. All my intention to stick an arrow in the target by flinging it just didn't measure up. So all these parts, when used effectively together, are what make a spell work. There's a saying I heard someplace which I like. Plan the work, then work the plan. In Jason Miller's The Sorcerer's Secrets, he has a similar saying imparted to him by one of his teachers. First the working, then the work. Spells have a lot of moving parts, and the first one starts moving when we first decide we need to do some magic. So with all these things going on when we do our spell work, it really shouldn't be a surprise that sometimes things don't go according to plan. Maybe our intention isn't clear. In another of Miller's works, The Elements of Spellcasting, he prefers the word goal over intention. There's a whole chapter in that book called Stop Making Crappy Goals, in which he lays out a few goals he considers crappy for spell work. Impossible or highly improbable goals, lame goals, vague and immeasurable goals. If we don't have a clear goal or intention in mind, it's hard to hit the target. If our heart really isn't in it, it'll be kind of hard to get things done. Think about the last time you did a thing, but you really weren't fully invested in it. Did you get the best results you might have? Determination, another way of thinking about will, is, well, it's a big determining factor in our spell work. It really is a case if you get out of it what you put into it. Okay, so you've got your intent all squared away and your will all fired up to make it happen. But if you don't have the skills to apply it, you may not be able to get much done. I'm not one of those naturally athletic types. When I was a kid, though, I did play some basketball. No matter how much I wanted to score baskets with every shot, I just didn't have the skills. Now, mind you, I did practice, and I did get a little better as time went on. So the most focused intent and will by itself will not make a spell work if we just don't have the skills and techniques necessary to move the energy. You may have noticed how I didn't mention talent just now. Talent is great and all, but it means nothing without the skill to use it. You might be a very talented musician, but it comes to nothing if you don't ever do anything with music. Magical skills and techniques are just too many to discuss in much detail at the moment. Check out my video, 4 Foundational Skills for Magic, for a discussion of, 4 such skills. I've left a link to that video in the description. We'll be looking at other skills and techniques in future videos as well. For now, it's enough to say that the methods of moving energy around are an essential part of any spell. Okay, so let's assume we have our ducks all in a row. We've got a clear intention, our heart is in the work, and we have the skills necessary. We perform our work and nothing. Are we sure nothing happened? Maybe it did something, but it just isn't obvious. How do we figure out if something didn't work as planned or just simply didn't work? Many practitioners I've spoken with, especially newbies, cast their spells and that's it. But I think it's important to do something after the spell is cast. In Inner Temple, Penczak calls it magical record keeping. He's talking about a magical journal of some kind, whatever you'd like to call it. Grimoire and Book of Shadows are common names for these kinds of things, and why not? They sound far more witchy and magical than diary or journal. But whatever you call it, you need to be doing some sort of journaling of your magical work. And it's not just the beginning part, where you record all the stuff you need and all the words you say and so on. I think it's important to journal results or lack of results as well. This part is just as important as the first part. After all, if we don't think about results, how will we find ways to improve? Taking a look at performance is an important part of magical practice. Athletes, musicians, artists, and writers, in fact, lots of different folks, review their work in an effort to improve. And that's kind of the point, right? To get better at the things we do. When we take a look at our results, we can gain a lot of useful insight into not only our magical practice, but into ourselves as well. And it's in this analysis that we might find that our spell didn't fizzle at all. It's just taken more time than we might have hoped to express results. And if it did fizzle, we might learn why it fizzled, and then we can correct and try again. And if our spell didn't fizzle but instead produced some unintentional or unwanted results, then our analysis after the fact might provide some insight on corrective actions. An important part of our analysis goes beyond just looking around and seeing what happened. This is where divination can come in handy. I think divination, in whatever form one uses, is an important part of magical work, both before and after the spell. Whether you throw cards, cast runes, use a pendulum, or contact your spirits and guides, a little divination can go a long way. Even after all the work and all the analysis, we may never find out why things didn't work or worked sideways. Accepting this can be tough. I know it is for me. I like to know the why of things. But accepting that we don't have access to answers right now is sometimes a necessary step. I don't expect that I'll ever know if the collard greens I hung last New Year's helped this year or not. But not knowing isn't enough of a reason for me to stop doing this little ritual. It's fun. It helps me feel witchy. And throughout the year, when I see those leaves hanging above the sink, it gives me a little hope. And maybe all those things are just the magic I need from those humble callings. I'd like to thank you for spending some of your time with me today. If you've enjoyed your time, please like, subscribe, share, comment. I'm Skaji. Safe journey.